On paper, this looks like a triumph. $1 trillion in defense spending, new ships, new missiles, artificial intelligence, space systems, nuclear modernization, a generational upgrade, as Congress calls it. But history tells us something uncomfortable. Big numbers don't always produce lasting power. I've watched this pattern before. Moments when fear, rivalry, and political momentum unlock vast sums of money. And moments later, when attention shifts, budgets tighten, and unfinished systems quietly decay. This bill, passed outside the normal defense process, raises a deeper question you should be asking. Is this the foundation of American military strength for decades, or a temporary surge that fades once the headlines move on? If you care about how power is actually built, not announced, stay with me. Because the real story here isn't how much money was spent. It's how it was spent and what happens when that money runs out. And to understand that, we need to step back and define the problem this bill is really trying to solve. So let's be precise about what this bill actually represents. This is not a normal defense budget. It is a parallel stream of money pushed through a reconciliation process, layered on top of the Pentagon's already massive base request. The result is striking. For fiscal year 2026, total planned U.S. defense spending crosses the $1 trillion mark. Not because of a single strategy document, not because of a long-term force design, but because urgency met opportunity. The bill targets real gaps: shipbuilding, munitions, missile defense, artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, nuclear forces, space. Each line item responds to pressure. The system can no longer ignore China's rise, nuclear expansion, missile threats, fragile supply chains, but there's a structural flaw hiding in plain sight. Most of this money lives outside the base budget. That means fewer guarantees for sustainment, training, upgrades, and integration once the initial purchase is made. In other words, the bill answers the question, what should we buy now? But leaves unresolved the harder question of what can we afford to maintain. To see why that matters, we have to look at how the system arrived here in the first place. To understand this moment, you have to look backward. For decades, U.S. defense spending moved in cycles. A crisis erupts, budgets surge, systems are rushed into service. Then the crisis fades, and so does the money. After the Cold War, the assumption was simple. Major power conflict was unlikely, efficiency mattered more than capacity, defense budgets flattened, industrial bases shrank, production lines slowed. But the world changed faster than the system did. China expanded its military at scale. Russia tested the limits of conventional war. Missiles, drones, and precision weapons proved that mass still matters, especially when it's cheap. Suddenly, the United States found itself with exquisite systems, but too few of them, advanced platforms that took years to build, and stockpiles that would not last long in a real fight. This bill is a reaction to that realization. It tries to compress time, to buy capacity quickly, to leap ahead in autonomy, nuclear modernization, and space. But when governments try to outrun structural problems with sudden funding, they often create new ones. And the first stress test comes when theory meets execution, when money turns into hardware. That's where the first cracks begin to show. The first pressure point appears where ambition meets reality. This bill pours money into shipbuilding, munitions, air and missile defense, more than half of its total funding. On paper, that looks decisive. In practice, it exposes how fragile the system has become. You can allocate billions for ships, but you cannot instantly create skilled labor, expand shipyards, or rebuild supply chains hollowed out over decades. You can order more munitions, but production lines don't surge just because Congress says so. The bill tries to force speed into a system designed for caution. It accelerates procurement before infrastructure fully catches up, and that creates a risk, money racing ahead of capacity. This is the first mini crisis, not a failure of intent, but of sequencing. Some programs will move fast, others will bottleneck, and some will absorb funding without delivering proportional capability. If you've ever wondered why defense programs so often arrive late and over budget, this is why. Spending is the easy part. Execution is where power is actually built or quietly lost. If this pattern sounds familiar, pay attention, because it leads directly to a deeper, less visible mechanism shaping everything in this bill. And once you see that mechanism, the entire strategy looks very different. Beneath the headlines, there is a quieter force at work. This bill is not just about buying weapons. It is about bypassing friction. By operating outside the base budget, the money avoids years of review, debate, and prioritization. That speed is intentional. It allows the Pentagon to move faster on autonomy, AI, space systems, and precise mass weapons, areas where delay has real costs. But speed changes behavior. When funding is temporary, programs optimize for quick wins. They prioritize acquisition over sustainment, fielding over integration, demonstration over durability. This is the hidden mechanism. Short-term money creates short-term incentives. Autonomous systems are procured before doctrine fully adapts. AI capabilities scale faster than testing infrastructure can mature. Nuclear and space investments advance while long-term costs quietly accumulate. None of this is irrational. It is how organizations respond when they sense a window closing. The danger is not that these systems fail. It's that they succeed just enough to justify themselves without ever becoming permanent. Because unless these programs migrate into the base budget, they remain vulnerable. They exist at the pleasure of future politics. And when pressure rises again, that vulnerability will be tested hard. The second crisis arrives quietly, but it cuts deeper. This bill doesn't just accelerate innovation. It reshapes priorities at the same time. Billions flow into autonomous systems, low-cost cruise missiles, unmanned ships, AI-enabled weapons. These are designed for scale, speed, and attrition. They reflect lessons learned in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in every conflict where mass and precision collide. But here's the tension. The US military was built for dominance, not consumption. For platforms meant to last decades, not systems designed to be expended quickly. Now the services are asked to do both at once. The Air Force and Navy pursue inexpensive missiles while maintaining costly legacy fleets. The Navy experiments with unmanned surface vessels while struggling to crew and sustain its existing ships. Innovation surges forward, while the old force structure strains under its own weight. This is the second mini-crisis, not technological but organizational. You can buy new capabilities. You cannot instantly shed old commitments. And when resources are finite, innovation competes with readiness. Every dollar spent accelerating the future raises pressure on the present. That tension doesn't show up in press releases, but it shows up everywhere else. And eventually, it shows up in the lives of the people expected to carry the load. And this is where the story becomes personal, because behind every system, every platform, every innovation line item, there is you, or someone like you. You feel this surge in spending not as a headline, but as pressure. Training cycles compressed. New systems arriving faster than doctrine can explain them. Old equipment kept alive longer than planned. The bill funds quality of life improvements, but money alone cannot buy time, clarity, or stability. When innovation accelerates without long-term planning, the burden shifts downward, to operators adapting on the fly, to commanders balancing readiness against experimentation, to families absorbing uncertainty while strategies evolve in real time. This is the human cost of temporary abundance. You are asked to master more systems, to operate in more domains, air, sea, cyber, space, to do so knowing that some programs may not survive the next budget cycle. If you've ever wondered why morale strains even during record spending, This is why. Power feels different when it's unstable. If this analysis helps you see the system more clearly, share it, because understanding is its own form of readiness. And from here, the story widens beyond the United States. What happens next does not stay contained, because defense spending at this scale reshapes the global system. These investments, missile defense, space tracking, autonomous weapons, nuclear modernization, are not neutral signals. They are read closely in Beijing. In Moscow, across capitals in the Indo-Pacific and Europe, the Golden Dome Initiative pushes missile defense forward. Space investments expand America's ability to see, track, and respond. Precise mass systems suggest a future built on numbers, not just superiority. To allies, this can look reassuring. A sign that the United States is serious about deterrence, about defending sea lanes, space assets, and nuclear stability. To rivals, it looks different, like acceleration, like preparation for competition without clear limits. And here is the paradox. Temporary funding can still trigger permanent reactions. Other countries do not wait to see whether US programs migrate into the base budget. They respond to capability, not accounting structure. So even if this surge fades, its signaling effect may not. Arms racing does not require permanence, only momentum. That is why short-term decisions can lock in long-term consequences, and why the future now hinges not on how much the United States spends next year, but on what kind of system it chooses to build from here. Looking ahead, there are three paths this moment can take. The first is the optimistic scenario. These investments migrate into the base budget. Temporary programs become permanent capabilities. Autonomous systems integrate with doctrine. AI matures alongside testing, training, and trust. Innovation stops being episodic and becomes institutional. In this future, the bill is remembered as a catalyst, a painful but necessary jolt that forced reform. The second path is more likely and more fragile. Some programs survive, others stall. A handful of successes justify the spending, while quieter failures fade from view. Capability improves but unevenly. Momentum exists, but coherence does not. This is the world of partial adaptation, better than stagnation, worse than transformation. The final path is the dangerous one. Follow-on funding disappears. Programs freeze midstream. New systems arrive without sustainment, and the force carries the cost of innovation without its benefits. In that future, this bill becomes a cautionary tale. Proof that money can buy speed but not strategy. Which path emerges depends on choices that haven't been made yet. Choices about budgeting, reform, and political will. And that brings us to the real question this moment leaves behind. So here's the insight I want to leave you with. Power is not built in surges. It is built in systems. This bill delivers speed, scale, and urgency. It fills gaps. It accelerates innovation. It responds to a world that has become sharper, faster, and more dangerous. But unless these investments are sustained, integrated into the base budget, paired with reform, and protected from political whiplash, they remain vulnerable. The real test is not whether the Pentagon can spend this money by 2029. It's whether the country can commit beyond it, because adversaries plan in decades. And deterrence does not run on one-off bills. If you want to understand where American power is actually headed, don't just watch the headlines. Watch what survives the next budget cycle. If this analysis helped you see the system more clearly, share it. And if you want the next chapter on how defense budgeting itself may have to change, stay with me. That story is already beginning.